There is a version of an AI assistant that almost everyone would want. One that already knows your meeting is at 2 o'clock, and that the confirmation email contains a different address than the one in your calendar, and that you have not responded to the message from the person you are meeting, and that traffic is going to make you late if you leave when you planned. You did not ask it any of those things. It simply knew. And it told you before you had to figure it out yourself. That assistant exists now in a form that is becoming more capable with each product announcement. Google calls parts of it Gemini. It calls the daily summary daily brief. It calls the broader strategy personal intelligence. And the question that this assistant raises, the question that neither the product marketing nor the privacy criticism quite manages to answer precisely, is this. At what point does an assistant stop organizing your life and start knowing too much about it? Not whether it is useful. It is useful. The question is something harder than usefulness, and it requires more precision than fear to answer well. For most of the history of AI assistants, the interaction model was simple. You asked a question, the assistant answered it. The relationship was transactional, bounded, and defined by what you explicitly typed. Gemini is moving away from that model. Google's 2026 announcements describe a shift toward what the company calls proactive assistance, an AI that does not wait for a question, but instead looks across connected information, identifies what matters, and surfaces it before the user has to ask. Daily Brief is the most concrete expression of this shift that Google has publicly described. It is designed to function as a personalized digest, something that analyzes information from connected apps, identifies important items, suggests action steps, and learns user preferences over time. Google describes it as an agent that works on the user's behalf rather than simply responding to the user's commands. The difference between those two modes is significant and worth sitting with. A chatbot that answers questions knows what you type into the conversation. A proactive assistant that analyzes connected services knows what those services contain, and it decides what to surface, what to prioritize, and what to bring to your attention based on its own analysis of that content. That shift from reactive to proactive is not merely a feature enhancement. It represents a different relationship between the user and the AI, one in which the user's agency is expressed not through each individual query, but through the decision to connect services in the first place. Which raises the first question this discussion needs to answer carefully. What exactly gets connected? Gmail, calendar, and photos are 3 different windows into a person's life. Understanding what each one contains is the prerequisite for understanding what becomes possible when an AI can reason across all 3 simultaneously. Gmail contains correspondence, work messages, personal emails, newsletters, travel confirmations, purchase receipts, account notifications. It is a longitudinal record of the things other people have communicated to you and the things you have communicated back. It contains your professional relationships in the form of work email threads, your commercial relationships in the form of receipts and order confirmations, and your personal relationships in the form of the conversations that happen through email rather than through messaging apps. Calendar contains structure, the appointments, meetings, deadlines, and commitments that organize time. It reveals where a person expects to be, when, and with whom. It contains the implicit geography of someone's life, the recurring locations that appear in weekly meetings, the one-time appointments that reveal medical visits or legal consultations or travel plans. Photos contains experience. The places visited, the people present, the events documented, the objects captured. Photographs are time-stamped records of physical presence. They show where a person was at a specific moment in time, who was with them, and what they were doing. Each of these individually is a rich source of personal information. What matters for this discussion is what becomes possible when an AI can connect across all 3. A calendar appointment reveals where someone will be. An email reveals why they're going. A photograph reveals who they were with last time they went somewhere similar. A receipt from an email reveals what they bought. A pattern across multiple calendar entries reveals a recurring commitment they may not have thought to mention. None of these individual pieces is necessarily sensitive. Each one was generated voluntarily, stored in a Google service the user chose to use, and accessible through a permission the user can control. But the combination of them, the pattern that emerges when an AI reasons across all 3 simultaneously, can reveal things that no single service contains and that the user may not have consciously decided to share with an AI system. This is the first uncomfortable realization, and it is the one that the product marketing does not fully surface. The question is not whether the AI has access to your email. The question is what the AI can infer when it connects your email to your calendar to your photos simultaneously. Google's framing of what it calls personal intelligence is worth examining in its own terms before evaluating its implications. Google describes the system as user-controlled and transparent. Users choose whether and when to connect services, such as Gmail and Google Photos. Calendar integration is being added as part of the expanding capability. The opt-in framing is explicit in Google's communications. These connections are presented as choices the user makes rather than defaults the system assumes. This framing is genuine and matters for understanding what Google has actually built. Connecting Gmail to Gemini is not the same as Google secretly reading your email. It is a user-initiated decision to extend the AI's access to a specific service, with the stated purpose of making the AI more capable of helping with tasks related to that service's content. The strategic difference between this and a standalone chatbot is, however, real and significant. A standalone chatbot is only as knowledgeable as what you type into it. Its context is bounded by the conversation. When the conversation ends, the context ends. A connected assistant can reason from information the user did not explicitly bring into the conversation. When you ask it what you have coming up this week, it can look at your calendar. When you ask it about the meeting, it can find the confirmation email. When you ask it whether you have been to this location before, it could potentially look at photographs. The user did not provide any of that information in the moment of asking. The user provided access, earlier at a permission-granting step that may have felt abstract compared to the specific inferences the system can now make from that access. This is the shift, and it is the thing worth understanding precisely rather than reacting to emotionally. The honest examination of this technology requires acknowledging its genuine capability before discussing its implications. The use cases that connected AI access enables are not manufactured convenience. They are solutions to real and commonly experienced frustrations with how information is distributed across digital services. Travel preparation is one example. A flight confirmation exists in email, a rental car confirmation exists in a different email, a hotel confirmation in a third. The calendar event may contain only the destination. Connecting these pieces, finding the confirmation numbers, the check-in times, the pickup location, requires the user to search through multiple services and mentally integrate the results. An AI with access to email and calendar can do this synthesis automatically and present the relevant information at the relevant moment. Meeting preparation is another. Before an important meeting, a user might want to review the last email thread with that person, check what was discussed in previous meetings, and identify any outstanding items. Each of these steps requires navigating to a different place, executing a different search, and mentally combining the results. A connected AI can traverse this information automatically. Action item identification is a third. Email inboxes contain requests, commitments, and follow-ups buried in conversation threads. Extracting these, prioritizing them against calendar deadlines, and surfacing the ones most likely to require attention today is a task that humans do imperfectly and that AI with access to both services could do substantially more reliably. The value is real. The access it requires is the reason the value exists. The reason the access question matters is that the value and the access are inseparable. You cannot have the first without granting the second, and the second enables considerably more than the specific use cases that motivated granting it. Here's the question that changes the frame of everything that came before it. What can an AI infer from information you have already given it? Not what data does the company have, not whether the AI read your email. The deeper question, what new information becomes available when existing information is combined by a system capable of reasoning across all of it simultaneously? Consider a hypothetical sequence, constructed to illustrate the concept rather than to describe any specific confirmed Google behavior. A calendar contains a recurring appointment at a specific time each week that the user has labeled generically. An email thread in the same period contains messages that reference the appointment indirectly. A pattern of photographs from around the time shows a consistent location. None of these individually reveals anything particularly sensitive. Together, an AI reasoning across all three could construct a detailed understanding of a recurring commitment in that person's life that the user never explicitly disclosed to any system. Or consider another hypothetical. An email contains a receipt for a purchase that might suggest a health condition. A calendar contains an appointment whose title is generic but whose timing correlates with the purchase. An AI connecting these might not be programmed to make this inference explicitly, but the information from which it could be made is present in the connected data. The point is not that Google's Gemini is performing these specific inferences. The point is that the principle of inference from connected data is not bounded by what the user consciously decided to share. It is bounded by what the AI can derive from what is available. This is the privacy question of the AI era, stated precisely. It is not about data storage or data collection in the traditional sense. It is about reasoning, about what becomes knowable when a system capable of sophisticated inference has access to multiple streams of personal information simultaneously. Building a clear framework for this question requires distinguishing between different levels of AI access and what each one implies. At the simplest level, there is information the user explicitly provides in a prompt, what they type into the conversation at the moment of asking. The user controls this completely and consciously. At the next level, there's information the user explicitly connects through an authorized integration. Gmail, Calendar, Photos enabled by a deliberate permission grant. The user controls this through the settings that govern which services are connected. Beyond that, there's information the AI retrieves from connected services to answer a specific request, the email it finds when asked about a meeting, the calendar event it surfaces when asked about the week. The user's expectation of this is generally aligned with what is happening. The level that begins to diverge from the user's mental model is proactive analysis. The AI scanning connected services to generate recommendations or summaries without the user having asked a specific question. This is what Daily Brief represents, and it is where the question of informed consent becomes more complex. The level that extends furthest from the original permission decision is inference. The AI combining information across multiple services to derive understanding that none of the individual services contained. This is not necessarily happening in any specific currently deployed feature. It is the direction in which connected AI reasoning moves as capability grows. The psychological significance of the jump from retrieving information to proactively analyzing it to inferring from it is not small. A user who connected Gmail to enable a specific feature may not have formed a mental model of what proactive analysis across all of Gmail's contents implies, let alone what inference across Gmail, Calendar, and Photos simultaneously makes possible. Google's position on personal intelligence is not one that deserves to be dismissed or caricatured. Google built opt-in access rather than default access. It built connected app permissions that users can review and revoke. It built transparency into how the Daily Brief feature is described. The company has explicitly framed personal intelligence around the principle that users choose whether and when to connect their services. These design choices are substantively different from secretly accessing services without disclosure. They represent a meaningful commitment to user agency that distinguishes Google's approach from a purely extraction-oriented model. The honest tension is not between user agency and corporate malice. It is between the mental model users form when they grant permissions, and the full scope of what those permissions enable as AI capabilities grow. Permission interfaces were designed for a world in which granting access meant enabling a specific function. The Gmail permission that let an app access your email to sync a single contact list was a bounded, comprehensible grant. The Gmail permission that enables an AI to reason proactively across all of your email to surface patterns and make inferences is a fundamentally different scope of access, communicated through an interface that evolved from the first model, rather than from a purpose-built framework for the second. Google says personal intelligence was designed with transparency, choice, and control in mind. The design intention is genuine. The question is whether the interfaces that implement that intention are sufficient for users to form accurate mental models of what their permission decisions actually enable. Understanding why Google is moving in this direction requires understanding the strategic position the company occupies. Google already operates most of the services that contain a user's digital life: Gmail, Calendar, Photos, Drive, Maps, Search, YouTube. The information spread across these services constitutes an extraordinarily detailed picture of who a person is, what they care about, where they go, and what they do. For years, this information existed in silos, useful within each service, not systematically connected across them. Gemini Personal Intelligence is, at one level, a coherent AI assistant strategy. At another level, it is the strategic activation of an information resource that Google has been accumulating across its services for 2 decades. The value proposition is clear and genuine. The more context Gemini has, the more useful it becomes. The more useful it becomes inside Google's services, the more valuable the entire Google ecosystem becomes. The more valuable the ecosystem becomes, the more difficult it is for users to consider alternatives that do not have equivalent access to equivalent information. This is not a conspiracy. It is a coherent business strategy that happens to align user benefit with ecosystem lock-in in ways that make both simultaneously true. The user who connects Gmail and Calendar to Gemini and finds it genuinely transforms their daily productivity has also made a decision that deepens their dependence on Google's ecosystem in ways that are difficult to fully separate from the productivity benefit. The story that Google's personal intelligence tells is not only Google's story. Microsoft is connecting Copilot to Outlook, Teams, and OneDrive in ways that follow the same architecture. An AI capable of reasoning across the services that contain a user's professional life. Apple is building intelligence features into the operating system that connects apps in ways that would have seemed intrusive a decade ago. Meta is exploring AI assistants that understand context from social connections and messaging history. The competitive question that is emerging across all of these companies is identical. Who can build an AI assistant capable of being genuinely useful to users' actual lives, which requires understanding those lives in sufficient detail to reason meaningfully about them? The assistant with the least information is safest from a privacy perspective and least useful from a capability perspective. The assistant with the most information may be extraordinarily capable, and may be the one whose implications are hardest for users to fully understand. Return to the original question. Is Google crossing the line? The answer requires specifying which line is being asked about. If the line is unauthorized access, reading Gmail or Calendar without user permission, Google is not crossing it. The personal intelligence features described require user opt-in and present connected app permissions that users can revoke. If the line is transparent communication of what access enables, helping users form accurate mental models of what proactive AI analysis and cross-service inference actually mean when they grant a permission, the answer is less clear. Permission interfaces evolve for a simpler model of data access. They are being used to communicate something considerably more complex. The line that actually matters in the AI era is not the line between authorized and unauthorized access. It is the line between what users understand they are enabling and what they are actually enabling, between the mental model formed at permission granting time and the full scope of inference that the permission makes possible as AI capabilities grow. Google knows what you have scheduled, what you have received, and what you have photographed when you choose to connect those services. The AI does not merely store this information, it reasons across it. The privacy question of the next decade is not how much data AI systems contain. It is what those systems can derive from the data they have been given permission to use. That question does not have a simple answer. It requires exactly the kind of attention that permission dialogues were not designed to prompt. The most powerful personal assistant may eventually be the one that knows your schedule, your conversations, your purchases, and your memories. That is precisely why people will love it, and precisely why understanding what you're agreeing to, before you agree, matters more than it ever has before. Because the question is not whether AI should know enough about you to be useful. The question is whether you will still understand how much it knows after you give it permission.